All right, Martin, you know how much I love diving into the weird and wonderful corners of global folklore. But today I want to zero in on Ireland, a place that just breathes myth and legend from every stone wall and rolling hill.
Oh, absolutely, Peter. Ireland is practically synonymous with magic. Leprechauns, fairies, banshees. You can practically feel the ancient stories in the air there. What's on your mind today?
Well, we're going to talk about two very different ends of the creature spectrum. One is something that exists in a really unique way in Irish lore, and the other is something that, well, largely doesn't, despite its global popularity.
Intriguing. Lay it on me. I'm already hooked. Is it something spooky, something heroic?
Both, actually, in a way. Let's start with the spooky but surprisingly heartwarming, the Irish werewolf, or as they're known, the Fowlad, particularly the werewolves of Ossory.
Werewolves in Ireland. I'm picturing something like a darker, more ancient version of the American werewolf in London, running through the moors. But you said heartwarming, which is not what I associate with werewolves usually.
Exactly. And that's where the Irish lore really sets itself apart. See, when we think of werewolves, especially from continental Europe, we often imagine these purely malevolent, bloodthirsty beasts, right? People turning into monsters under the full moon, losing all sense of humanity, just pure aggression.
Yeah, like the classic horror movie trope. A curse, a bite, and then you're a mindless killing machine. Very rarely a hero.
Precisely. But the Fowlath, the Irish version, they're a completely different beast. They're often depicted as protectors, guardians even. Imagine a giant wolf appearing not to hunt you, but to lead you out of the wilderness or to stand guard over your lost child.
Whoa, that's a massive shift. So less beware of the full moon and more thank goodness for the giant furry guy?
Exactly. They're not inherently evil. They help the wounded, guide the lost, and especially protect children. It's a really nuanced portrayal. Think of it more as a symbiotic relationship with nature or a sacred duty rather than a monstrous affliction.
That's incredible. So how did this benevolent transformation come about? Is it still a bite or something else entirely?
This is where it gets even more fascinating. The most famous account comes from the 12th century writer Giraldus Cambrensis in his Topographia Hibernica. He recounts a story about a priest who's travelling through Ossory, which was an ancient kingdom in present-day Kilkenny and Lowish, and he encounters a werewolf couple.
A werewolf couple? That's quite a meeting. I bet the priest was a little surprised, to say the least.
Oh, completely. But here's the kicker. They explain to him that they're not cursed by a bite, or some dark magic in the usual sense. They are a family from Ossory, and they're under a hereditary condition, almost a divine or magical gift, where every 7 years, a member of their family transforms into a wolf. While they're in wolf form, another family member takes their human place, and they can actually speak. They retain their human intelligence and morality.
Wait, they can speak? So they're basically like intelligent, bipedal people, but in wolf form? That's a huge departure from the mindless beast image. And it's hereditary, not infectious. So it's not a curse in the sense of you're doomed, but more like this is your family's unique thing?
Precisely. It's almost presented as a duty or a natural cycle for their lineage. Some theories even suggest it was a divine punishment or a magical condition tied to ancient Irish families or druidic practices, rather than some malevolent curse. And when they're in wolf form, they're not just any wolf. They're typically described as larger, more powerful than ordinary wolves, often with a distinctly grey or black coat.
So a bit more majestic, a bit more imposing. Not just a mangy dog. It sounds like they're embodying the wildness and power of nature, but still with that spark of humanity. It's a very different kind of monster, if you can even call them monsters.
I think creature of legend is more fitting, and that retention of humanity is key. They're not driven by primal urges alone. They have reason, they have moral compasses, they make choices. It makes them incredibly sympathetic figures, which, as you know, is rare for werewolves in other traditions.
It really does. I'm imagining a foul lad having a philosophical conversation with a lost hiker before leading them to safety. That's a story I'd read. And it probably influences how these creatures are portrayed in modern fantasy and horror, right?
Absolutely. The Irish werewolf stands out because it allows for a much more complex character. You can have a werewolf hero, a werewolf guide, a werewolf guardian. It taps into that connection to the untamed wilderness, but also the ancient wisdom of nature, rather than just pure, unadulterated aggression. It's not about the beast taking over, it's about a different form of existence.
That's truly fascinating. It makes me want to dive deeper into those old texts now. The nuance is just incredible. So that's one side of the coin, a unique, often benevolent creature. What about the other side? The one that largely doesn't exist?
Ah, yes. Now we turn our attention to the idea of a Bigfoot in Ireland. You know, Sasquatch in North America, Yeti in the Himalayas, these large ape-like bipedal hominids that are reported to roam remote wilderness areas. When you think of cryptids, Bigfoot is probably one of the first that comes to mind globally.
Definitely. The blurry photos, the footprints, the tales from hikers. It's a huge phenomenon. So, is there an Irish equivalent, some shaggy giant roaming the bogs or the forests?
And this is where it gets a little anticlimactic for those hoping for an Irish Sasquatch. The short answer is no. Ireland does not have a widely recognized traditional cryptid that perfectly matches the Bigfoot description. The concept of Bigfoot is primarily a North American phenomenon, deeply rooted in their own indigenous legends and later popularized through cryptozoology.
Right! Really? That's quite surprising for a country so rich in folklore. You'd think with all the ancient forests and remote areas, there would be some tale of a shy, hairy giant.
You would, right? But it just isn't there in the same consistent ape-like form. However, if we stretch the definition a bit and look for concepts that might evoke a similar sense of a large, mysterious or wild humanoid, we can find some distant relatives.
Okay, distant relatives I can work with. So, what are we talking about then? Ancient gods? Heroes?
Exactly. Let's consider giants first. We have the Fomhaia, or Fomorians. These were ancient monstrous beings in Irish mythology who predated the Tuatha De Danann. They were massive, powerful, and often depicted with deformities, like one eye, one arm, or one leg.
The Fomorians. Yeah, I remember them. They were like the primordial chaos gods, weren't they? Definitely big and certainly monstrous, but I wouldn't call them ape-like in the Bigfoot sense. More like grotesque, giant humanoids.
Right. They fit the big and mysterious criteria, but not the ape-like part. Then there's the legendary hero Fionn Mac Cumhail and his warrior band, the Fionn. Fionn was often described as being of immense stature and strength, responsible for shaping the very land, like the Giant's Causeway legend where he builds a bridge to Scotland.
Ah, Fionn, the ultimate Irish hero. So big definitely applies, but he's a heroic figure, not a reclusive cryptid. And again, not ape-like. Just a very, very large human.
Precisely. So we have giants, but they're either monstrous primeval beings or heroic figures, neither of whom really fit the mold. Then we could consider the broader European concept of the wild man, or woodwoes. These are hairy, uncivilized, human-like creatures dwelling in forests, appearing in medieval art and literature. They represent the untamed wilderness, a primal fear of what lies beyond civilization.
Yeah, I've heard of the woodwoes, usually depicted covered in leaves or moss. Again, human-like, not ape-like. And it's a general European concept, not a specific, widely known Irish cryptid, like a local wild man of Connemara, for example.
Exactly. While there might be local stories of isolated feral individuals, there's no widespread, consistent wild man cryptid in Ireland akin to Bigfoot. And finally, a less direct but interesting one, the puka.
The puka. Now that's a classic Irish one. The shapeshifter. Usually a dark horse or a goat, sometimes a rabbit or a raven, but you're saying it could be a Bigfoot.
It's hints. It's less direct, as I said. But the puka is a trickster that can take many forms, and sometimes those forms are described as imposing, dark, or hairy humanoids. So it could appear in a large, somewhat monstrous humanoid form, but its defining characteristic is its shape-shifting and trickster nature, not a consistent ape-like appearance as a dedicated cryptid.
I see. So if you encountered something big and hairy in the Irish woods, it would probably be a puka playing tricks on you, not a shy, reclusive ape man. And tomorrow it might be a raven. That makes sense. It's about magic and trickery, not biological classification.
Precisely. So when it comes down to it, the idea of an Irish Bigfoot is largely a modern speculative concept rather than one rooted in deep traditional folklore. Any attempt to find an equivalent would involve really stretching or reinterpreting existing myths about giants, monstrous beings, or shapeshifters, none of whom perfectly align with the typical Bigfoot description.
That's a really clear distinction. So Ireland gives us werewolves that are surprisingly benevolent guardians, steeped in ancient family curses or gifts, retaining their humanity and even their speech. But a Bigfoot? not so much.
Exactly. It really highlights the unique flavor of Irish folklore. It's less about the unknown ape man and more about the interconnectedness of humans with the wild, the magic in the land, and perhaps a deeper understanding of transformation and duty, as seen with the Fowlath.
Which, when you think about it, is far more complex and emotionally resonant than just a big hairy guy in the woods. The Fowlad story has layers of moral dilemma, tradition, and compassion. It's not just a monster story.
Right, it's a testament to the richness and depth of ancient Celtic storytelling. They didn't need a simple unknown beast. They crafted creatures with complex motivations and roles in their world. It's a folklore that challenges our preconceptions, especially when we compare it to other traditions.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that not all legends are cut from the same cloth, and sometimes the monsters you expect turn out to be the protectors you never knew you needed. Thanks for shedding light on these incredible tales, Peter. My understanding of Irish mythology just got a whole lot deeper.
My pleasure, Martin. And for everyone listening, next time you think of werewolves, maybe picture a Fowlad leading a lost child home, rather than just howling at the moon. It truly changes the whole perspective, doesn't it? Keep exploring those fascinating corners of history and myth, and we'll catch you next time.